The night he agreed to go on that date, something inside him already felt off. Not dangerous, not dramatic, just wrong. Like the quiet before a storm you never see coming, but somehow feel deep in your chest. Ethan Carter stood outside the warmly lit restaurant, his faint reflection staring back at him through the glass door. He straightened the collar of his only decent shirt, the one he hadn't touched since his late wife's memorial. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, his eyes worn from years of raising a child on his own. Dating wasn't something he did anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. And yet here he was, because his boss had pushed him toward it, because she had given him that rare, unreadable smile and told him he deserved something more than just getting through each day. Because when the CEO like her says something, it doesn't really feel like a suggestion at all. Before we step inside this story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet ways love finds people when they least expect it, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Ethan had worked at the company for 3 years, long enough to know that Miss Harper was not someone who got involved in her employees' personal lives. She was sharp, composed, and distant in a way that earned both fear and respect. The kind of leader who could recall every detail about the business, but never bothered with birthdays or small talk. Except with him. It had started in small ways. A question about his schedule, a passing remark about how he always walked out the door at exactly 5 o'clock. Then one day, out of nowhere, she had asked about his daughter. Just once. Just one brief, unexpected moment where her voice went soft. He hadn't read much into it at the time. Until she called him into her office last week and told him she'd set him up on a date. At first, he thought she was joking, but she wasn't someone who joked. She handed him a small card, the name of the restaurant, a time, and nothing else. No name, no description of who he'd be meeting, just a quiet certainty that the woman was worth his time. Ethan almost said no, but that evening, his daughter Lily had looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes and told him he deserved to be happy again, that he didn't always have to come home to an empty house after she went to sleep. And somehow that stung worse than the loneliness itself. So he said yes, and now here he was. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warm light and the soft hum of conversations. The air smelled of fresh bread and something sweet. It felt too nice for someone like him, like he had walked into someone else's life by accident. The hostess led him to a table near the window. He sat down, back straight, hands folded awkwardly in front of him, and waited. Minutes passed. Each one felt longer than the last. He checked his watch once, then again. Doubt crept in. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she wasn't coming. Maybe this whole thing had been some kind of test he wasn't meant to figure out. Or worse, maybe he just didn't belong here. Then the door opened, and everything changed. Ethan didn't recognize her right away, not because he didn't know her face, but because his mind flat out refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. She walked in with quiet, steady confidence, her presence shifting the room in ways you couldn't quite put your finger on. Conversations around them softened, heads turned, not out of nosiness, but out of instinct. It was her, Miss Harper, his boss, the CEO, the woman who had set him up on this date. She was the date. His heart didn't race. It didn't even skip. It just stopped for a second, like the whole world had hit pause to let reality catch up. She spotted him almost immediately. Of course she did. She never missed anything. And without a moment's hesitation, she walked toward him. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping softly against the floor. His mind grasped for words, for logic, for any kind of explanation that made this add up. But nothing came. She reached the table and held his gaze, her expression calm and composed, but not cold. Different. Softer. And that's when he noticed something that threw him off even more than her being there. She was nervous. Not in any way that would be obvious to a stranger, but he saw it. In the slight tension across her shoulders, in the careful way she set her hands down, in that fraction of a second she hesitated before taking her seat. This wasn't a power move. This wasn't a game. This was real. The silence between them sat heavy with everything neither of them had said. Ethan finally settled back into his chair, his thoughts still knotted. Why him? Out of everyone she could have chosen, why him? He was just an employee, a widower, a man with far more responsibilities than dreams left. He wasn't remarkable. He wasn't even trying to be. And she was everything else. Driven, brilliant, untouchable.
The kind of woman people admired from across the room but never really knew. Until now. The evening moved slowly, almost carefully. Not uncomfortable, but unfamiliar, like two people learning a language neither of them had ever spoken before. Ethan picked up on things he had never noticed at work. The way she really listened when he talked. The way her face changed when he mentioned Lily. Something genuine softening behind her eyes, not just polite interest. And for the first time he caught a glimpse of what lived beneath that composed, professional exterior. Loneliness. Not the loud, obvious kind. Not the kind that reaches out for help, but the quiet, suffocating kind that builds slowly over years of choosing work over connection, success over vulnerability. I recognized it immediately, because he had been carrying the exact same thing. As the night went on, the stiffness between them gave way to something I hadn't expected. Understanding. Two people from completely different worlds landing in the same emotional place at the same time. But underneath it all, that one question still lingered in the back of his mind. Why? Why would someone like her choose this? Why him? That answer didn't come that night. It came later. In the days that followed, things shifted. Not in any dramatic way, not in ways most people would notice, but between the two of them, something was different. At work, they kept things professional, but there was a new layer underneath it all now, a quiet awareness, a secret that only they shared. And outside of work, they started seeing each other again. Not often, not in ways that invited attention, but enough. Enough for Ethan to feel something he had spent years refusing to let himself feel. Hope. And that scared him to death, because hope meant risk. It meant cracking open doors he had made a point of keeping shut. It meant letting someone into a life that had been carefully built around protecting his daughter, around surviving grief, around making sure he never had to go through that kind of loss again. He didn't know if he had it in him, but every time he looked at her, some small part of him thought maybe, just maybe, it was worth finding out. But life never hands you something good without testing whether you really want it. The turning point came on a quiet evening when Ethan had to cancel their plans. Lily had come down sick, a high fever, a restless night, the particular kind of fear that only a parent knows in their bones. He didn't think twice. He stayed home, holding her small hand, whispering reassurances even as his own worry climbed. He sent Miss Harper a short message apologizing and telling her he couldn't make it. He expected understanding. What he didn't expect was a knock at his front door. She was standing there, not as a CEO, not as someone powerful, just as a woman who gave a damn. Uncertain, holding a small bag with medicine and soup. For a moment, neither of them said a word. Then Ethan stepped back from the doorway, and everything changed again. That night had nothing to do with romance. There were no grand gestures, no perfect moments. It was something much more grounded than that. She stayed. She helped. She sat beside Lily and spoke to her softly, gently, in a way Ethan never would have imagined possible from the woman he knew at work. And watching that, he finally understood something he hadn't been able to see before. She wasn't here out of curiosity. She wasn't playing a part. She was choosing this, choosing him, choosing his life with all its chaos and complications and imperfections. And in that moment it clicked. She hadn't set him up on a date with a stranger. She had taken a leap, a real one, on a man who had always seen her as a person, not a title, just as she had quietly started to see him. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, do you believe love can find us when we least expect it? As the days turned into weeks, what they had continued to grow. Not fast, not with friction, but honestly. There were hard moments, times when Ethan pulled away, scared of what he stood to lose, times when she wrestled with balancing the life she had built against the one she actually wanted. But through all of it, they kept making the same choice, each other. Not perfectly, but consistently. And sometimes that's exactly what love is. Before we get to the end, here's a special request. Comment the words "second chance" if you believe people deserve love after loss, because that's what this story has always really been about. Not a CEO, not a single dad, just two people who believed their shot at love had already come and gone, only to find out it had been quietly waiting for them all along. Ethan stood one evening in the very spot where it had all started, outside that same restaurant. But this time he wasn't standing there alone. She was right beside him, not as his boss, not as someone out of reach, but as someone who had made the choice, over and over, to walk through life alongside him. The road ahead wasn't certain. It never is. But for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid of what was coming, because he didn't have to face it by himself anymore. And sometimes that's all it really takes to change everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means more than you know, and every share helps these stories find the hearts they need the most.